Hi, it's Jim from Trek World, and sit down and relax as we take you on a massive 7 hour analysis of 7 major Star Trek episodes.
For those of you joining us, we'd like to welcome you. We are going to get ready today to take a look at our watch party for the Corbomite Maneuver. We have a guest that I will introduce to you and ask my, the typical opening questions that you hear me ask people about, where they saw Star Trek first, stuff, things of that nature. And then we will begin the actual watch party at 15 minutes after. So I guess what I'll go ahead and get started to do right now, I'm just going to take a real quick look down here. Okay. We have no real, although I got to say, Red Shirt Bob, happy Spocktober 5th, all looking forward to this. I have never heard this referred to as that. Actually is pretty good. I beg for the ability to steal it perhaps later in a video format somewhere. Okay, so for those of you who joined us before, you recognize two of the three of us. The third person you've actually seen quite a bit of in the chat logs, like Manly and other people we talked to. Alexandria has been with us for quite some time, and we've had her as the third seat, I guess, in the chairs this morning. So Alexandria, what we can go ahead and do is I'm going to give you the next few minutes. Tell us, you've heard me ask these things before, and you see it in the comment stuff. Give me an idea about how you found Star Trek, when you found Star Trek. Bonus points if you can remember the first thing you actually saw and why it meant to you. Not all of us do remember that, but some of us do. And then we'll take it from there.
Okay. All right. Sheesh. Okay. So I got into Star Trek, really got into Star Trek. I've seen it before, but I had chosen to get into it during the pandemic of 2020. I was starting college and just had a lot of time on my hands because I was at home. And I'd been meaning to get into Star Trek for quite a while, and I was a little overwhelmed with it because at that point there was already so much content. And I'm someone who watches in release order, so I decided to start with the very original series, actually. And yeah, I watched The Cage. I was like, okay, this is a lot to digest. But yeah, but I had kind of had it on as background noise, but I was just enamored with the production quality, even just even though it was just from decades before. And yeah, I just fell in love with the acting and and just the dynamics between the characters. And then it was more or less just background noise, but I could still pick out what was going on because of just how wordy it was, and I would just have it on while I was just doing my schoolwork or my chores or just arts and crafts. And then one night, okay, Jim is in the corridor, McCoy is voicing his concerns about Spock. Chapel is screaming. Spock comes out. He's angry. I'm watching a mock time. Yep. I was like, oh my god, I have to watch this. Okay, so finally, my full undivided attention is glued to the screen, and yeah, and then at the very end, I was actually very shocked to see him kill Kirk. I'm like, oh no, and then I actually forgot in that moment that main character plot armor was a thing. I was like, what are they gonna do now? He's dead.
Yep.
And then I was just as shocked as Spock was when it turns out he was alive. And then I see Nimoy smile, and I'm like, oh my god! And it was a real genuine smile. It was the first one we've seen in quite a while, and one that wasn't caused by drugs or whatever. It was actually genuine. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I just really liked this series and the acting. I was really sold there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us probably remember the first time we saw Amok Time. I do think.
Oh yeah. I think I kind of watched it around the same day it actually aired, September 15th. So it was almost serendipitous.
Yeah, for me, it was T'Pau. It was the Vulcan, whatever she was, priestess.
Oh yeah. And I saw the hand sign a few times, and I was like, oh wait, I'm seeing this for the first time. And yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to quite put it, but I guess it's a very 80s take on the future for sure.
Yeah, I think that you definitely touched on some of the things that I consider to be cornerstone, and that the human boundaries, the boundaries of relationships. Ironically, that you'd mention that particular aspect, especially with Data, because in the community, I generally have a post I prepare. It goes up once a day. I've got them stacked for like a month in advance, whatever. And The Offspring was just the one I reviewed, or the one that I just threw out to people either yesterday or the day before. I'm not sure which, but that was the one where, of course, trying to make another stable positronic brain. And several people, and Raj and I have known this. Raj and I, we've talked about this. It's not the type of thing that older people tend to say a lot in open things and stuff like that. But yes, you can cry at different things in Star Trek. And that was one of those episodes for me. And for a lot of our viewers, because I've heard many people commenting. One person goes, "I'm not crying. It's you that's crying." That's the only comment they made. But that was exactly, when she realizes that this is it. But not only it, but it's probably winding down in like the next minute to 2 minutes, and she's able to express for him all of the things that she felt that he never did. Very, very powerful. And it's that exploration of the human boundary, I think. Well, more importantly, since now we're talking about data and law, we've established a little bit here that it's not really the human boundary. It's more of like the sentient boundary, because all races have that. Okay. And as we go further into Star Trek with Deep Space Nine, okay, you see it very, very heavily in the Cardassians because of the way you have that's Romulan. You have Obsidian Order, and then and another point, I guess, and we are, for those of you on the call, we are about 9 minutes into the call. We got about another 5 minutes or so before we start, and I will re-break here in a moment and set up what we're going to be doing on watching Corbomite Maneuver. But now I'm sort of answering a question that I would have asked Alexandria for Deep Space Nine, but I can't resist doing this one. I can tell you that the thing, as a parent, the thing that I fell in love with immediately in strong characterizations with Deep Space Nine was Ben and Jake. That relationship, father and son, having just lost their mother, and then Ben even blaming Jean-Luc because of Locutus. That one nailed my butt to the seat from day one. But those boundaries between races, those where the edges of where feelings end, is one of the things I think that Deep Space Nine did really well with. And a real good example of that would be Andrew Robinson's Garak. I mean, brought on board as a one or two time shot, actually was sort of kind of hinting in the beginning, because Ira said Ira regrets he backed off of it. But there was kind of this thing, wouldn't this be neat if this Cardassian had a relationship? He actually had a crush on Julian Bashir. And then they backed away from it because they figured, no, it's a little bit easier in this today's day and age. We can just make them good friends that don't necessarily recognize their friends. And by having to play it that way, Andrew Robinson brought something to the Cardassians. I mean, because on one hand, you've got the guy who plays Gul Dukat, okay? And you look at him, and he actually was, I think, one of the best liked bad guys in Star Trek history over a period of time. But you got Gul Dukat on one end, and then you have Garak on the other. And just think about the way their minds are between Gul Dukat pretty much any time in the beginning, and Garak in The Pale Moonlight, when Sisko confronts him that you blew up, you killed the senator. And then Garak gives us a "you can't handle the truth" moment that was absolutely dead on.
Yep.
Those are those boundaries that just amazed me, because it showed that it really doesn't matter here in the world today. It doesn't really matter the color of our skin. We have the same exact reactions. And if you consider a wider swimming pool, so to speak, it doesn't even matter the type of life form that we are. The only thing that matters is whatever part of us, whether it's the spirituality of the soul, whether it is the otherworldliness or the I don't know what you'd call it for Star Wars, for the Force, but there's all these things that recognize that there's something that is beyond just the body. Okay, and that's where we truly are like each other, no matter whether we're going behind. I always screw that up. It's watchtrek-world.com. If you do not have Corbomite Maneuver ready to watch on some other device at this point, you can go to that URL and it will take you to Pluto. and Pluto will then automatically take you to this particular episode. It is free to watch. It does have ads in it, unfortunately. It is free to watch, and you do not need to register for Pluto. So if it pops up and says, hey, would you like to register to Yacht? Just click no and just go right into the episode. If you do have it on Blu-ray, DVD, streaming networks of whatever kind, then you're more welcome to follow us up through there. And then Manly actually gave me an idea about a year ago when I saw somebody ask him, what are you watching on Manly? I think what somebody said right up in the thing. He says, oh, nothing. He says, I just play it back in my head while we're on the call. And that gave me the idea for what I'm going to do here for those of us on the call in the event that you don't want to run another copy somewhere. I'm going to start a video here in a moment that updates every 30 seconds with a screenshot from that episode sequentially. In the bottom right-hand corner of that video, we'll always tell you the timestamp of the episode that we're watching. So for those of us that are moving and watching with or without commercials, whatever you look at the bottom corner of that, that's what everybody's seeing on this main channel. Because, of course, like I said, when Pluto starts sticking in commercials, the 15-minute runtime will become a little bit longer for you, so you probably might want to know how to adjust. But a lot of people just choose to watch the slideshow as it takes us through the episode. So if you are challenged in such a way that you cannot open up a second window or another device, that is perfectly fine. You can still follow along with our slideshow. And yes,
we just had Redshirt Bob pop up and said this was his first time on the chat. He's been a fan for about a year now, and that he was 10 years old when TOS originally aired. So, Bob, it's great to have you with us today, and welcome.
Yep. I also want to count one other person, and then I'm going to go ahead and launch the stream here in a minute. But I just saw it just a few minutes ago, about 5 minutes before Bob, Mr. Atos, the first evolution of humanity from 23rd to 24th century with lack of interpersonal conflicts. Dude, you sound like just the kind of guy I like to talk to. I actually know this gentleman, okay? We've traded comments back and forth. He actually is the current YouTube channel that I'm pretty sure I am pointing the Sci-Fi channel vignettes to. He had collected the first section of them when I was digging, when I also hosted them back here to try to make a complete documentary archive, which YouTube went, no, you do that, you cannot. Yeah, fine. So they smacked me around for 3 months, and so I pointed them all to him. So
here's the real question, Jim, though.
Yeah.
The real question in here is he the real Mr. Atos?
And would he ever admit it if he were?
Exactly. So is he one of the replicas, or is the real Mr. Atos?
All right, so let's see if I can do this now. I'm going to try to share this video without looking too stupid. So bear with me for a second here. There we go. Watch party. And where are you? Right there. So
there we are.
So it does make us all real small. Sorry about that, guys. There's not a whole lot I can do about it. That's a little better. There we go. Nope, that'll do just fine. All right.
Not that, Jim.
That's not exactly the most informative first screen for an episode. I have to admit, I used to absolutely love, as a child, just starting to learn Star Trek, trying to guess which episode it was just from the cold open before the credits.
I still do that. And it's amazing how many episodes are similar that it'll throw you off if you're not,
Notice the high colors.
Yeah, I wonder why that is, or why that was.
Yeah.
This was one of the very first few episodes, and then back to see Lieutenant Nichelle Nichols as Lieutenant Hora. She is in gold instead of red.
Yeah.
This episode didn't even have her in it. They had hired her, and they brought her in for this episode. It was her first time being seen on screen. One of the episodes she did a voiceover was actually heard before she showed up, but she was seen on screen, and they carved up Lieutenant Bailey's lines between him and her.
Actually, this episode, both Spock and Sulu seem to have taller collars than the rest of the crew. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's a holdover from, the cage or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not sure either. My guess is it was they were experimenting with them at this point, because if you look at the cage, and then more importantly, if you look at Where No Man Has Gone Before, and you look at the way the uniforms were in there, okay, like for instance, the Velcro was very easily visible, on Spock's in that episode. I think that they were, for lack of a better word, they were dialing in on the design aesthetic that they wanted for these. But that's just my guess. I know, because this might have been actually. I'll let one of you guys jump in here. Michael, I saw you on here. Michael Hodges.
personally I had seen recently where it was one of the first 2 or 3. Had they broadcast them in the order they were shot, it would have made more sense. You would have seen the progression of the uniforms and things as they went.
Indeed, Tiger. It's space winter. That's why they were. That's why the turtlenecks.
Over
They will actually have quite a bit of wardrobe issues in this episode.
Well, I think
No wardrobe malfunctions, but I'll point them out to you guys. They were in the video that I did on when I covered some of the idiosyncrasies about these episodes.
I think you're
This
probably
was the first regular episode produced after the 2 pilots. Thank you, Daniel.
yes.
I didn't want to go completely on a limb, but I thought it would have been one of the first ones. It's a whole lot easier for me to appear to be much more quick and confirmed on what I know when I'm working in scripted video. In live stream, I have to play a little bit more realistically.
Well, I think you're probably right in that as the series progressed, they experimented with the uniforms. Probably some of what we see later on is feedback from the actors themselves, because I would imagine those taller collars or thicker collars, with all the heat from the lights, the production lighting, eventually probably got to the point where they were like, I'm just way too hot. You need to do something about this collar, And so as the series went on, you would see those minute changes in some of the uniforms and things.
Yeah.
And there's Shatner with his shaved chest again.
I think in the first 8 episodes, he was shirtless half the time.
If you ever hear him talk about that, he's like, he recently did an interview and somebody asked him about, how he, didn't have any hair. He's like, well, they shaved me. He's like, trust me, you wouldn't want to see me now. He goes, I look like a mammoth. He shaved me so much,
I always wanted someone to ask him at a con or something how he felt about when I think it was Bread and Circuses when Nimoy went shirtless, but they didn't have him shave.
Right.
I learned he refused to shave.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, Well, then again, some of that is Shatner too. I mean, his sex symbolism, more or less. I mean, he didn't mind being acknowledged by the ladies. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But I mean,
what was the guy's name? There was a TV show in the 70s or the 80s. I think it was in the 80s. I don't think it was Dallas. But anyhow, Bob Ewing, it was Dallas. Okay, the actor that played Bob Ewing, he left the show to play Man from Atlantis. And he shaved his entire body for Man from Atlantis. And it lasted like a year or so. And so he went back, and they were trying to figure out, okay, well, they had already killed him off. And he was a human speed bump. He got hit by a car. So they killed him off. They buried him. So how are they going to bring him back in? And so the episode begins with him in the shower, and suddenly it's like, okay, he's back. And the entire previous year was a dream. Never really happened. It's like, oh, I can't believe you guys did that. But that was tied to what you were just talking about, Roger. There was a perception for a period of time in the 80s when it was considered for your marquee male TV stars or whatever to be, to be completely smooth and well groomed, and so they would do that, and then that went away. I think
it was Patrick
Duffy. Thank you,
Patrick Duffy. Thanks, SFF 87.
Yeah, Rob just also said too. I believe you're referring to Patrick Duffy.
Yeah, they had to have been sweltering. They're all very shiny.
Yep. Especially Shatner. I think I'm wondering if they didn't shoot that previous scene where he's in the sick bay and this scene right afterwards, because you don't want him to come in there all cool and collected and dry. You want him to be sweaty because he just got done doing a physical, and he throws his shirt on and he comes right up to the bridge. He's going to be obviously be flustered and sweaty. So actually,
Jack Fletcher said that colors didn't stand.
Explain it, Jack. Thank you.
Yep.
And
I think that's the first we've heard from you, Jack. Nice to meet you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not sure, did they launder these uniforms? Because I heard they always were dry cleaned.
Yeah, I think they were too. Yeah, but the whole deal about them removing the insignia each night. That, as far as I know, that was everything. That might have also actually been the collars.
Yes. Well,
and that might have played into how do we make this more streamlined? Because one of the shots we just saw showed Shatner, Nichols, and Nimoy, and their collars were all slightly different.
Yes. Yep. Well, and also if you look at the recent photos of some of the original artifacts, if you will, the original uniforms that are in the Paul Allen, I think, or whatever. And the blue, Spock's blue, uniform, and it's now like purple. A lot of that discoloration came from the fact that they were dry cleaned over and over and over so often that the chemicals in the dry cleaning reacted with the colors of the uniform, the material that they were. I think
I've seen some of the auctions show up that have been like positively reddish.
Yeah,
they really shifted really bad.
Which I think by the third season, where they all miraculously, all the uniforms, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, their uniforms miraculously grew about 3 or 4 inches longer. And I think that was to hide Shatner's.
They changed they went from woven to non-woven fabric, or the other way around.
Yeah, it was like a knit material in the third season, so it was much easier to clean. They didn't require dry cleaning, I don't believe, at that point.
So Jack just answered a question that I had. I should have always been a bit. So Jack, he said Nimoy had different color to allow zippers on both sides to put over their ears. So what's interesting here is that I think in the later episodes, because of the way that zipper went down, you can hold it much higher. But when we looked at Where No Man Has Gone before in this watch party about 6 or 7 months ago, I fixated on the fact that Nimoy's collar had like a zipper hanging off the side of it, and you could see where it velcroed shut. And it was like, why in the world is Nimoy's collar so absolutely crude compared to everybody else's? And then I think in the episode we did see one other person in the background had something like that, and I think that's tied directly to what Jack is saying.
Yes, I agree.
Because that would explain that one. He and that other person in the background had this really weird collar, and it was funny because somebody left a comment in the thing afterwards where he said, after watching the watch party, I learned that Jim has an obsession with Velcro. Why has that one got Velcro?
I remember that. I'm going to lay back because I know we talked about letting Alexandria respond to some of these too, so I'm gonna let her.
So what did you think about the way Bailey reacted? What do you think the challenges, Alexandria, were with Bailey's reaction to hostiles? He had somewhat of an emotional.
Right.
I don't know.
This is really funny, but I don't know why the audio keeps cutting out every time you ask me a question. Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, that is perfectly fine. It's the nature of the internet. Bailey in this, he's sitting, I guess, in the navigator's thought here. He has quite a few overtly emotional reactions to Baylock, and what were your take? Because he was the only one on the bridge that was reacting that way. So what was your take with him when you saw him for the first time? What were your thoughts about, positive or negative, about this character?
I think the whole point of it was to show how I think it was meant to highlight the way Spock reacts under pressure, whereas versus other certain humans. He especially did not seem to know a whole lot about how adrenaline works either. He's like, put a stop to it, if you will. And I'm like, that's not how it works. That's really funny. I think it was just to show just how different he was from the other humans.
Okay, really good. Do you agree with Kirk's decision to take him on board Baylock's ship at the end?
I think by that end he had proven himself. So yeah, that may be a little while ago. I think he was trying to redeem himself at that point.
Yeah.
Almost like Bailey's character, he's on that cusp of whether he can really handle the promotion that Kirk gave him, or whether he's not quite ready yet. And so he's really sitting on that fence. And, McCoy points it out later. He's like, I think you promoted him too early. And Kirk's like, no, I think he can handle it. So he's right on the fence. And so, and you see that play out later in the episode where, he gets overreactive, and, we're going to see that coming up where he gets overreactive and gets to the point where he just kind of has a meltdown on the bridge. Gets, Kirk sends him to his quarters, but then he comes back. And that's kind of the test of his character. Does he just sit in his quarters and brood about it like a 5-year-old, or does he kind of man up? Does he, become an adult? Does he come back and acknowledge his weaknesses and say, I'd like to return to duty? And so
redemption,
that can be anybody. I mean, that could be that's anybody, man, woman, nationality makes no difference. I mean, we're all, it's an emotional level and an intelligence level, whether we're ready or prepared for what we encounter. So, Kirk as a commander has to make that decision. Is this person really ready for responsibilities of what I'm promoting them to? Or McCoy, who, from a doctor standpoint, no, he's not mentally ready type of thing. So
interesting. Indy says there's a good follow-up book called The Face of the Unknown where we see Bailey and Balok again. And that's he's tying directly into the line that's been in my head since I first asked Alexandria. And that was when, Kirk says, I think we owe you a look at the face into the unknown. And I was curious to see the reaction that in general viewers here would have to that, because there could have been an argument made on both sides about taking Bailey into a situation which was not necessarily deemed to be a safe situation to begin with. Okay. As a matter of fact, the one big thing that really left me hanging at the end was they beam over, and they drink their little Tranya and they talk to him, and Kirk, nobody actually ever thinks to call over the Enterprise and tell them everything's all right. They just disappeared, and then the episode went off the air for that night.
Well, you stop and think about it. It could be like Mars Attacks, where they think it's
so here's another shot with McCoy and yet more alcohol during the day. I haven't really noticed that as much.
Oh, I have lately.
Yeah, lately. Now there is a really good behind-the-scenes shot of Rand and Kirk and this scene, and apparently I'm not sure why they did so many retakes or whatever, but you can actually find it. It's out there on Pinterest and some other places. You would actually think that it was a shot from the episode, except that Shatner's actually got a cigarette in his right hand held out to the side, sitting on the table. Yep. And it was because during, in between the rehearsal shots and blocking shots and stuff like that, Nimoy used Tootsie Roll Pops or lollipops of some type or another.
I saw that, Jim, and that totally shocked me because I didn't know that Shatner ever smoked.
Hey, Kurt. I think, as much as I hate to say it, I think everybody did back then. Everybody that I ever saw, and it's mind blowing that so many people did, and it's even more mind blowing that it took the Surgeon General in '72 for the first person to ever stand up and say, "Hey, did anybody stop to think about how this isn't very healthy?"
Thing is, I think I heard. I think first of all, because I'd never seen any production shots of Shatner smoking. Secondly, I remember how much Shatner, hearing later that Shatner had prodded Nimoy to quit smoking back in the original series. Because so at some point, probably Shatner wised up and quit smoking, and then he was trying to get Nimoy to quit doing it. And I guess that's where I heard it. So I just assumed that
we lost Alexandria. I'm going to keep an eye on her to see when she comes back. This scene is right after the sick bay scene, and before any scenes on the bridge, according to These Are the Voyages.
Matt, we resemble that remark, by the way.
Yep, we're all bald.
Oh, we're all bald. Paul, good evening or good afternoon, Paul.
Hey, Paul, good to see you, my friend.
Hey, there's David.
Good. Yes, Nimoy was a chain smoker from like no other, and he'd actually been off of it he'd been 20 years past it, and still, like David said, COPD and emphysema. We all saw it. I mean, we were watching him on the Star Trek movies. We watched him on Fringe, played William Bell, and I'm even sure we actually saw him leave Los Angeles to go somewhere. And so that when we knew he was doing something. I don't remember what it was, but it was when he flew back to Los Angeles and they pushed him through the airport with an oxygen tank in a wheelchair that we knew something had just horribly happened because he was gone. I think it's possible that we may have accidentally. Oh, there she is. Hold on. She's
Sorry about that. My connection is just really faulty.
We were almost having to explain where we hid the body. So
without me?
Virtually no less incredible.
Yeah, all right. So Shatner probably smoked on camera in his Columbus. So yeah. So we're talking about wardrobe. I find it really interesting. And in light of
Sorry, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Oh, in case it isn't obvious, I should have said something right up front. What you're watching, that the screenshots are actually from the remastered original effects episodes.
Yes.
So these have not been scanned, restored from DVDs. I have. They're supposed to be the masters that were used for VHS. Somebody sent them to me like years ago, and because I've been bemoaning that we don't really, and we still don't really see Star Trek today the way we saw it when we were growing up, which was very like the screenshot here, very fuzzy, very indistinct. So now, even if you flip to what are supposed to be the original VFX versions, everything's still razor solid because they didn't change the VFX, but they went ahead and they upgraded and rescanned all the negatives.
Paul brings up a great point. Clint Howard talks about how fans today will come up to him and yell at him. If you've ever seen him do the current interviews these today, he talks about how horrible the Tranya was because as a little kid at his age, Tranya that they used during the episode during production was grapefruit juice. And a little kid his age, that's like the most bitter. Could you use anything more bitter that's gonna
He had food colorings. Hell, we still had red dye number 5. It was going to kill us a few years later, but it was still there.
He's like, he goes, I hated it. He goes, but we had to do take after take after take of this stuff. And he goes, I'm surprised you didn't catch me, puckering up and, making faces on the episode. So,
you're being victimized when the director goes, no, we still have half a bottle left. Let's do it again. Matt Deckard, I no longer wish to taste Tranya.
I did too, Rob. I thought it was probably orange juice or something, but no, it was Clint Howard states that it was grapefruit juice. It was very, very sour, Yeah, exactly, Paul. You can keep. I've looked for that since I saw that interview where you look to see if he winces after he takes the first drink of Tang. Now, unfortunately, Ronald, it wasn't Tang, at least not according to Clint Howard. So I don't know. In a recent interview, actually, it might have been one of the sites that he did. So.
Does anybody else remember? Does anybody else besides me remember him from Gentle Ben?
Oh,
was
God.
That the name of the series?
I remember Gentle Ben. Yeah.
It's crazy, but he was actually the more famous of the two Howard boys at that point.
Yep. And then he was also in Andy Griffith. He was, Leon. He played the little boy with the Western outfit on and he was always walking around carrying a peanut butter sandwich.
Oh yeah, Ronald, I remember it from being put. Yeah, Tang. That's the the astronauts used. They said, yeah, they might have. I don't know.
Well, when I was younger, that's what I.
David's weighing in.
Drink of the astronauts. Yep. Who out there still has one of the original Tang quart bottle, plastic quart bottles that they used to?
I'll be right back, guys.
When you bought the Tang, the can, it used to come with a white frosted plastic container with an orange lid on it. We had a bunch of those when we were kids that we bought Tang all the time. Where's David when we need him? Because as the medical doctor here, and for the
he did just actually say NASA did not invent Tang. It was used to cover up the heavily chlorinated water on board Apollo. But they did use it, I guess.
Yeah. I missed that comment, unfortunately. Alexander brought up a great point. I wish we had any more for a few more years.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Was there any more body talk while I was gone for a few seconds?
No.
A minute ago, so.
Has anyone in an anthology about follow-ups to TOS episodes?
Like what happened to...
I suspect that you don't see a lot of it in publication because of the use of characters that are created and owned by other people. So yeah, I think that might have something to do with it, Paul. I'm not really sure, but I know that's the case in a lot of in science fiction in general. Why it's difficult for people to follow up on something that was started by another author if it's not someone in the estate. Which is why when Frank Herbert died, his son James took it over. And anyhow, I don't know, but nobody else has done that. I assume that's why it's that. But it would have been a bad idea. I mean, like obviously they talk about it a little bit at the end of a piece of the action. Maybe what would it be like if we come back in 20 years.
Kurt brings up a great point. I vaguely remember that. I have fond memories of my rubber band powered moon rover I got as a kid that was shrink wrapped to the side of a jar of Tang. I remember that.
I don't.
Back in the day, that the Tang came in the actual glass clear glass jars with a green lid on them. Wow.
You know, the point that Alexandria you brought up earlier about the COPD awareness and stuff, I think we saw similar last minute roundups by both Yul Brynner and John Wayne. Exact same thing, but too little, too late. You know, after when they reached their end, I think Yul Brynner actually started before anybody else did. I think he actually was a spokesperson and stuff for maybe a year or two before he died.
Yes, remember those commercials actually. Busy's, yeah, I vaguely remember that. My gosh, that's been a while back. Oh, wow. I think I'm pretty sure it's still out there. I haven't had any for years, but we used to have the Fisher space pens that you could write, that the astronauts used. You could write upside down with them. You could write through oil, all that kind of stuff. They marketed that.
It was the only pen in the world that would write upside down at the time or something like that.
Exactly. I'm waiting for David to chime in.
He's going crazy.
I'm sorry, Alexandra. I didn't hear you.
I don't blame him. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I was just engrossed in the episode.
Take a look at the buttons on the right-hand side of the command chair there. An overwhelming shade of green.
Oh, yeah. On the face of the unknown, seeking refuge, going to the home of the First Federation, an astonishing collection of the world's hidden galaxy beyond. Wow. Paul knew it. We sold tons.
That's a good one, Matt.
So great.
Wood shavings.
I can't wait to talk to David after this on the call. That's going to be interesting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because he wasn't able. For those who are just wondering, we have every 2 weeks when we get off this call, we have a follow-up call, which is sort of like a Zoom call that we have with our patrons. And so a group of us get together and we form some pretty close relationships and bonds. And it's funny because as we travel from convention to convention across the area, we generally meet each other. And this last convention that happened, David was unable to attend because he has important duties to attend to, whereas the rest of us were inconsequential beings that would not be missed. So he wants to hear about our visit there. He's probably, out of all the people I know, he's probably the only one that if we all disappeared tomorrow, somebody would be in a hard-pressed fix to replace him. So
exactly.
NASA invented the space pen, a big investment. The Russian used a pencil explosive in IO2. Oh, wow. We don't allow that on the ISS, do we? I assume that's on the TSA's do not. Is there a TSA do not travel item list on the ISS?
Well, you know, Jim, too, that the Patreon call is another great plug for, we'd love to have anybody join us. I mean, become a patron, and we'd love to.
Oh, this is a good scene.
So.
Yep.
He almost apologizes.
It's already happened once or twice, but it's going to happen some more, too. They had a particularly bad time with McCoy's normal uniform and his medical smock in this episode. He'll be on the bridge numerous times, and you cut from one scene to the other, and he changes uniforms.
Yeah.
And there was one point where they actually, one point in another episode where they used a pickup shot of him in the medical smock from not that episode, which leads me to believe that they did some establishing several things. No explosive allowed. Okay, station manifest.
This is probably the only episode where you really see Kirk and McCoy get into it really for just a few seconds there. There's Michael.
Probably, since this was like episode 3, this was probably John D.F. Black as the showrunner, right?
I think you're right, Jim.
Before Gene Kuhn.
Yeah.
Because that probably plays into a lot of it, because it was Kuhn that actually turned up the friendship between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. That was his idea to make them, which I always thought was interesting, because the original plan was that the big three were Kirk, Spock, and Rand. I mean, that's why they shot all the publicity shots with her. She was actually on a real, honest to God, you have X number of episodes a season contract when Nichelle didn't even exist at the time, but all the others were day players. So it actually cost money for her to be on there. And I think historically, we know exactly why she got that money, and that was not her fault at all. And then when she didn't agree with why she's getting the money, they fired her butt. But yeah, so they didn't, when Gene got rid of her, he didn't really pick a third person.
Right.
I am not Smuck.
Yeah, David's right. We're in a gold uniform. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Jackie.
One of the actors who were still alive. Michelle was the most recent to pass, and she worked role for a few episodes.
Wow. Michael, you have too much time on your hands.
For real.
Right, he's right. But how in the world do you arrive at that kind of conclusion?
Why does that detail stick out to you the most?
Exactly. How much data ran through your mind on a moment of boredom that actually came up with that answer?
Jim, I thought we had enough random, worthless information stacked in our brain, but Michael, I think, has got more.
Absolutely. I love it. Unfortunately, I had to stand Mike up for lunch. We were supposed to go out for lunch this past Friday, and then we had multiple changes, and then I had a last minute change and had to postpone till
I'm
next
happy
week.
to have you anyway, Jackie.
And then after I had to postpone, then he says, "Well, I'm good at my original time, but I wasn't anymore." So,
And not to put Alexandria on the spot, but what part of the country are you located?
yeah.
Oh, I'm from the Southwest. Well, where I come from is kind of a funny story because I've been all over the states, but I'm currently residing in the Southwest. I'm in Arizona. It is
Excellent.
very hot and dry over here, but I cope by thinking it's Vulcan.
Excellent. Yeah, exactly. One question that I was going to ask before we came online, and it slipped my mind. So wanted to make sure we asked that before the end of the episode. So
Okay.
I think
I learned that after the production of this episode, that's when they decided that Vulcans wouldn't sweat, so that's why Nimoy's makeup is a little bit different here as opposed to other episodes.
Right.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, because he does look a little sweaty in this one. Yeah.
I could stand to be corrected, but believe it or not, I think I actually looked up to that. And the gentleman who actually played the most interesting man alive, he never actually was in a Star Trek episode. That was a very famous internet meme that spread. And I think the idea came down to, if I remember correctly, that he actually auditioned for one of the guest starring roles or auditioned for a part and did not get selected, but that put his name on one of the daily sheets or something. And somebody saw that and went, "Oh, okay."
David's comment about, well, the flight directors does not allow red on that shift for mission control. I got away with it once. It was a flag tie, and you allowed it.
I'm going to give you guys a sneak preview of the next book that I'm reviewing. Okay, it's called Star Trek: Exploring the Original Series, and in this book, one of the things this guy does is he does one of the most unique and interpretive red shirt counts I've ever seen. And he came back with some very specific things. One is that there was a red shirt. To be considered a red shirt in this conversation means you had to give your life up in the line of duty while wearing a Starfleet red shirt. Okay, only one red shirt was ever female, which was surprising. 60 red shirts died in the course of the series. 60 people die in the course of the series. 73% were red shirts. One gentleman was red shirted twice, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. And 2 people came back from the dead after having been red shirted. And let me see. So there was another one I thought. I can't remember. But he was just getting really, really interested in some of the red shirt statistics I'd never heard before.
Glad to see you back, Alexandria. I saw you kind of drop for a second.
Yeah, and Paul is actually being a little bit...
Back in body talk. I knew it.
So, yeah, Paul actually wrote a series of books on the AMT models. He was, and still is pretty much, considered probably the source on in particular, the Enterprise model, but I'm pretty sure he wrote on all of them. And I think, Paul, he sent me a photograph once. I think he might actually have shown the very first aftermarket lighting kit on an Enterprise, a real one, and not the little, wheat things that, the wheat lights and stuff that came in the first few times they were made. Yes, Paul's Gen Zero.
Yep, Gen Zero, yeah.
And for those of you who are new and going, what the heck? Gen 1 is anyone who discovered Star Trek in the 1960s or 70s, generally, which means we're different from everybody else, not because we're better. No, absolutely not. Matter of fact, we tend to be more cantankerous than everybody else. But most of our early Star Trek time was dealing with the fact that we liked a series that was dead and was never coming back.
Right.
And beginning in the 1980s, we have Gen 2, which is the people who were born and raised in around that area, of which Alexandria fits very well into Gen 2. And they basically are from, they can like the original series and animated, that's just fine. But their time frame, was correspondent with Next Gen, DS9, or Voyager. Gen 0 is a Gen 1 person who was in or around the Los Angeles area during the time of Star Trek. B. Joe Trimble would be an example of that. Because they actually experienced Star Trek.
Live, actually.
Is she still alive?
I'm just going to Google her real quick.
B. Joe is, yeah. John died earlier this year.
Oh,
Yep.
really?
Last year. It was John that passed.
Yep, she's still here.
Wow. She's still with us.
I guess your experience of Star Trek really does matter because of just how different television was back then.
Right.
Yep.
Looks like Jackie and Redshirt Bob and the majority of us are Gen 1, looks like.
How did you know Joe?
I would bet Star, the Star Trek, those fan groups.
Yep.
Like, for instance, he knows Franz Joseph. He knew Franz Joseph, who did the Star Trek Tech Manual. Franz's daughter, Karen, who's still around. He's very, very close friends with Doug Drexler. I think Paul reached out to me separately after Doug did, but Doug had reached out just to introduce himself to me, very, very kind, very giving person of his. Next week, 4 p.m. Central Time. Would love to have you. If it works out well, we'll do this again. If not, We've wasted nothing. So thank you, everybody. Please take care of yourselves, and
Thanks, y'all.
God bless, guys.
Take care, guys.
If you have any videos, photos, or documents that you would like to donate to us, please feel free to send them to Jim at trek-world.com or submit them via the web at submit.trek-world.com.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be looking at Arena, and we'll also be talking about some stuff that has come to light within the past week since my last live stream about the 3-foot model. But before we go too far, I'd like to introduce you guys to somebody. We have a very special guest joining us today via a long-distance call. I'm sure the toll charges must be killer. Can you hear me there, sir?
Earthling. Yes, I can hear you.
So I understand that you actually met Mr. Shatner a couple decades back?
If you mean Captain Kirk, yes.
He didn't leave much of an impression, or did he?
Captain Kirk was a very worthy opponent.
Oh, I'm sure that they will be happy to hear that. So I'm curious. We've seen Gorn in the original series, and we've seen it in a few other places in the past. But we're seeing a totally different side of your folks now with Strange New Worlds. So how do you folks feel about the way you're being portrayed, or how the publicity campaign is going between Gorn and Federation space?
We are quite happy to see our brethren in this new series.
Very good. Very good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let you go because I know that the long distance charges on this are pretty extreme at this particular point. But I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning. Anytime you want to join us in the future, always feel free to do so.
Thank you, Earthling. Please start the video. I grow weary of the conversation.
Understood, sir. Absolutely. Okay, folks. So what we've got right now is we've got a little bit of news that broke going into the beginning of the week. Actually coming into the mid part of the week. I think this was actually on Wednesday. Our friends over at Inglorious Treksperts, which is a podcast by Mark Altman and Dan Dockerman, they actually did a 1 hour podcast earlier this week. As you would expect, hold on one second as I try to bring Roger back. There we go, into the real world. As you would expect, the conversation obviously fell to the 3-foot model because, of course, our friends, hey, John, nice to see you this afternoon. Conversation went to the 3-foot model because Darren was actually part of the people that were there on the April 1st when they reviewed, when everybody looked at the model. And he highlighted just two things that I wanted to point out to everybody. And there will be, I think, hey, Freebird, hi. I think there will be more to come on that. Anyhow, Darren actually said that in April of 2023, that in April of 2023, there were photographs that began to circulate among the back channel props people. Okay, this could be sites like DPRF or whatever. I'm not sure, but he said back around that time, a picture began to circulate which showed the 3-foot model on its gooseneck stand with the base and the business card on the base of the thing, sitting on a chair. And he didn't say how many pictures he'd seen. And matter of fact, he may have actually referred to it as picture singular. I'm not sure. Can't remember. There was a lot of discussion and then it just went away. But the interesting part is that date and photograph, if the photograph and the date actually do coincide with when he believes it to be. And so if any of you out there actually have access to a post, that photograph, somebody could point me in the direction of where that chatter was in April of 2023. It throws a monkey wrench in the story we were told about the sellers. The sellers actually indicated in their lawsuit and everything that we knew that they purchased the cube, the storage cube, sight unseen on October 27th. And then discovered the model in a bag. So, okay, yes, it is possible they were completely unaware of what was in the storage unit. But somebody was, because somebody had that model apparently in April, whether they got it from the storage unit and put it back, or whether they got it there and then put it in the storage unit, because we've all had that discussion that if you find something like this and you do not want to be associated with how did you come into possession of stolen property, potentially stolen property, the auction, the storage auction thing works a million times because there's really no way to combat it with the exception of this possible audit trail using a photograph. The other thing that Darren mentioned was that while they were there, they actually tested the saucer. And they were surprised to find that it was hollow because Richard Dayton had always been quite explicit about, oh, this is one solid piece of wood. But it appears that the saucer was made in two pieces and then glued together. And I think if that's the case, that's still, I could still see Richard Dayton talk about it. Well, it was solid wood because a lot of the pieces were glued together. The nacelles were glued on the struts on the secondary hull, the leg bones connected to the thigh bone, stuff like that. So I think that it's very likely that, we could still look at it being that way. But two very interesting things. Look for a video within the next month, hopefully, because as you can imagine, creative gets bumped around a lot on my end because of things like this. But I think I want to do a video that shows us the timeline on the 3-foot model from the day it was made to the day that it was lost, and then all the pieces that we've been able to actually understand at the very end.
Jim, I almost wonder if that dome has to be hollow, because if it were solid, it would be so heavy that thing wouldn't stand. It wouldn't sit right. It would nosedive every time you set it down.
That's a really good point. I had always made the assumption it was like 30, maybe 30 pounds or something like that because of it. But we know that the design of the Enterprise, as far as for performing in real space, it's top heavy on the saucer, and the nacelles are under supported, which is why we have, out of universe, in the real world, we have all these problems with the studio models and with the models that we make.
Right.
So, yeah, I can imagine that it would have been, but then again, that could be why it fell from wherever it was.
Exactly. True. Very true.
So how has your week been in Star Trek land, Roger? You had anything?
It's been a busy week for me, family wise. Things are going on with the family. In fact, my son and his girlfriend are visiting this weekend. So, but I told them, I said, 4:00 rolls around and I'm on Trek World. And they're like, Dad, don't worry about it. It's cool. So, yep.
So have you? I think you do. I think you're like me. I mean, do you watch Discovery?
I do. Yes.
Okay. So we're 8 episodes in to what I assume is the final 10. We had 2 episodes to go. What are your thoughts so far this season?
I'm impressed with it. I really am. I think the writing's well done. The acting as well, I think is pretty well done too. I'm impressed with it.
I think that the current episode 8 or whatever, I think is the best use of the book character I've ever seen.
Yes. Oh no, I agree.
And as some of you that have been on the channel for a while know, that the problem I have 2 big problems with the show, but that still doesn't mean I'm going to disown it. Okay. But, one is I really I would never buy into Michael Burnham being able to recover professionally in Starfleet.
Right.
The second thing is that her insistence prior to the season of including Book in everything, even though he was in Starfleet, and last season he was the cause of the entire season being a plot snafu that they had to solve.
Right.
I was not very happy when this season began, and the first thing they did was come up with a reason to explain how Book comes back on the ship again.
Right.
But yesterday, this week, I thought was pretty good. I think it's interesting that we're finally seeing a little bit more of the Breen,
yep.
And what they're and why they were intimidating in Deep Space Nine. I don't think we thought they were anything like the Jem'Hadar, but
right.
you put the Jem'Hadar and the Breen together with the Cardassians, which is what happened in the early parts of the Dominion War. It's not necessarily a neighborhood corner bar that you want to walk into alone one night.
I agree totally.
So for those of you, I guess we got a few people online right now. We're getting ready in a few minutes. Usually about 15 minutes in, we'll go ahead and start the episode. The episode is Arena today. You can watch that episode any way that you see fit. If you want to, you can use the URL right up there at the top of the screen, watch.trek-world.com. That'll take you to Pluto and will automatically take you to the episode. Pluto may ask you if you'd like to log in. You can say no. You don't need to create an account. You don't need to do anything. Please be aware that Pluto works outside the United States, but the links are all different. So for those of you who might be listening from Canada, when you click on the link, it will probably take you to Pluto, but it won't take you to Star Trek. And Star Trek may or may not even be available up there at this point, to be perfectly honest. If you want to watch from your own private media server, that is perfectly fine. Or if you want to watch from Paramount Plus, obviously, you'll be able to follow along with us. For ease here on the channel, I will be bringing up Arena in a few minutes. And basically, we're going to do a snapshot like every 15 seconds. So on the screen at all times during our conversation, you'll have an image of where we are storyline in the episode, as well as a time code down in the bottom corner to indicate how far we are in the episode. This episode has a running time length of 50 minutes and 45 seconds. Just to be cognizant for everybody, if you're watching an episode like the Pluto one, you're going to be a little bit slower than that because you have commercials. Or if you're watching Paramount Plus with commercials, you may be slower than that. It's the raw runtime that was 50 seconds. So expect it to get a little possibly out of sync if you're using a version that shows commercials. So do we have anybody on the line today that has never been on one of the watch streams before? If so, go ahead and pop up there in the bottom window. And let's see, while we're waiting for that, I do want to chum the waters a little bit, Roger, with the Well, the Star Trek fact files I was telling you about.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Back in the 1990s, in Great Britain, there were 2 part works that were created that basically said, you pay me $20 a month or whatever the monthly price was. I'm going to send you some binders. And in those binders, every now and then, I'm going to send you the binders every now and then, but every month I'm going to send you a pack of cards. Now, in some cases, the cards would be really, really nice, like the old Time Life recipe cards our mother used to get when we were growing up through the TV advertisements. And in other cases, in the case of the the Star Trek fact files, is they're 8x10 glossy sheet of paper. They ran them at one completed. The fact files completed. The Star Trek Universe cards did not. They made about 800 of the Universe cards. But this is the interesting thing. The fact files completed. They sold 19 volumes and over 7,800 pages of Star Trek. Now, that material has been used. The original Star Trek magazine that ran from like 1999 to 2001, and we'll be doing some videos on that too. But it was used with a lot of the stuff that was used in there because it was produced by the same people. Sure. And a very vast majority of the artwork and information that is shown up in the Eagle Moss Starship collection and their hardback book cover collection also comes from those pages as well.
Wow. Okay.
So
awesome.
Pretty amazing. You can find the individual sets, volumes on eBay. Expect to pay about $1,000 for the whole package. You can piecemeal it if you're lucky. One thing to be very careful of if you do go looking for it is make sure that it's the English version, because believe it or not, it was more popular in Japan than anywhere else as far as I can tell, to the point they actually made 7 additional insert sets in the Japanese version that are all in Japanese. So if you buy one of these things and it happens to be the Japanese version, you're not going to be able to read any of it. And I discovered that about a year ago when I ran across probably 3 or 4 UK vendors that were selling various parts of the set, but they were all the Japanese version. They didn't have any access to the English version.
Wow. Interesting. Very interesting.
So I don't know, some first time joining live. This is one of my favorite episodes too. I think it appeals to the Boy Scout in all of us from way back when.
I agree.
Go ahead, Roger. Sorry.
No, I agree totally. But this one and City are my 2 favorite episodes of all time.
I wonder if I have a. I know I have a favorite. I just not really thought too much about it.
It's
every time I try to pick one, I go, "Oh man!" But I forgot about this one.
There's many great episodes of Star Trek, but those 2 for some reason are the top of my list. Yeah.
Okay, for those of you following along at home, basically what I just did was go ahead and start the screen. It'll update about once every 15 seconds for Comic Con 12, 13, 14, and voila, new screenshot. So give you some idea of what's going on anyhow as we go through this.
Is this the original FX? Because it sure looked like it at the beginning.
This is the original FX. Yeah, I have... I don't even think these are, I might be wrong, but I don't even think what I'm showing, the ones I use for mastering this, I don't even think they're remastered. I think they were the very last set that was done, I want to say before the 1998 DVD, but I'm trying to remember. I don't really know. I have to look into it and see.
Interesting shot of Spock's strap on his tricorder, and it's brown. That's one of the few times you see a brown strap on one of the tricorders.
Yes. And there's actually an auction house that's got one of the Hero tricorders up for sale in auction right now. I saw the link like yesterday. And the thing that really impressed me the most with it was that it looks unused. So the very first thing that occurs to me is when you see something that old and it doesn't look beaten and battered, you got to ask yourself, why in the world isn't it beaten and battered? It has provenance, supposedly. And they supposedly will let you know which episode it was used in. The only thing is, I only think they had like 2 of them. I didn't think they had many. I think it was just the 2 tricorders.
Yeah.
And I'm not. And I know others have sold. The problem with the auction market is that the replicas are selling now, and some of the original replicas from the 1970s and 80s are so true in workmanship and construction to the 60s version.
Yep.
That it's difficult to tell if you're dealing with something that's screen used or a replica.
Yes. And I don't know about you, but I'm still waiting for that wand version to appear.
Oh, yes. And there was some scuttle on that. There was something about that like a week or 2 ago I read somewhere where somebody published a public relations response from somebody or whatever, and they said, yes, it is still an active. Wand is still actively working on it.
Wow.
So, no, there was no real word as to why the delay or why things are being drawn out. But hey, as long as it's still a valid.
Yeah, I'm signed up. I don't know about you, but I'm signed up on the site for news snippets, and I haven't seen anything on my email come through yet. So I'm not sure if that was, and that's via email, not via social media. So. It's an interesting scene coming up where Hurley, I think, is the first guy that gets fried here in a second when he says, "Captain, I see something," and he gets zapped. And name, if I'm not mistaken, in the episode, the script is Hurley, is how Kirk introduces him. But then after he gets zapped, I could swear, I haven't turned the closed captions on, but I could swear I hear Kirk say Kelleher. So I'm not sure if I'm just hearing things or if it's Shatner maybe forgot what the name was and just threw one out there or what.
Yeah, I run across something similar to that. There was I was editing one of the future reviews of episodes, and it's widely believed that in this episode that Shatner accidentally refers to Spock as Bones on the communicator.
Okay.
But true to form, I turn on closed captions, and it doesn't even render the sound that he made as anything.
Yeah.
And so I did not include it in the video because listening to it, I think it was one of those things where the sound reminded you of the word bones, but wasn't necessarily.
Right.
So, yeah, sometimes, and I think ironically, the audio part of the original episodes is probably our weakest link.
Yes.
Because there's not a whole lot you can do to restore audio, at least not to the degree of fidelity that people are doing with the video over the years, obviously.
I think any kind of audio cleanup would have to be you're able to do that with like recordings, like tape recordings and things of that nature. But when it's already connected to the film, I don't know. There's probably limited on what they can do.
Yeah. Now, I did do something. I've been meaning. I didn't even tell you about it, Roger. I'm sorry about that. I've been meaning to tell people on the channel or whatever. But I have gone back with the original bloopers, and I've cleaned and isolated the voices on the audio, and it's astounding how clear they are now to see everything, hear everything they're saying.
Right.
So be on the lookout. I will put a video up probably maybe next month sometime after Wonderfest, where maybe I'll take one of the 3. We got obviously 3 seasons of bloopers for the original reels. Maybe I'll take the one of them and we'll process it through and strip all of the noise and the static and the echo out of it. For instance, the shot that was in the blooper reel that I reviewed probably, or the episode I reviewed a week or 2 ago, was Spock sitting on the bridge, and it was the shot where his son Adam comes out of the turbo lift.
Yeah.
And when I cleaned it completely, you can clearly even hear the director reading the scene description in Nimoy just before the door opens. You'll hear the director reading the screen description or whatever, and then getting ready to call action. And then literally right as he's finishing up the scene description, Adam comes out and walks around to his father.
Hi, Daddy.
Yep. And it was just absolutely amazing to me because I knew I'd heard the Hi Daddy part, but those bloopers have always been difficult to listen to because of the fact that they were, nowhere near, the quality of the episodes, and obviously never got remastered.
Absolutely, yeah. There's times when they're very difficult to hear because they're so dirty. The background's so dirty on them. It's difficult to make out some of what they're saying. So.
I think it's crazy the number of people we've had sit beside Sulu in the first season.
Oh yeah.
It was like a revolving door.
And of course, this is Christopher Pike from Menagerie, the crewman, and I'm sorry, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. The actor.
Ron Kenny.
Yes. I don't know. It took me a long time to realize, till I got much older, to realize that was the same actor portrayed.
I'm glad you mentioned it. Slipped my mind. Exactly.
Yeah, Menagerie.
Yeah, I remember the same thing. I found out during some research I was doing a couple of years back that he also played the helmsman in one of the episodes. I didn't make the connection till you just said something.
Yeah, and like I said, when I was a kid, of course, I never made that connection. But then later I got, you look at the facial structure and the hairline and all that, and I'm like, yeah, you could tell it's the same actor. But until you kind of, somebody tips you off to it or whatever, sometimes you don't notice that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, his facial structure is pretty much the same as Jeffrey Hunter's was. I always thought that they did a good job, and they did a good job or they had good luck in the fact that the guy that they did to play Pike after the accident,
right,
was very believable that you were looking at Jeffrey Hunter under the same kind of makeup.
Yep, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, when my brother and I were both little watching these in a syndication, I think we both at the time thought that the actor, playing him in Menagerie was his stunt double because he looked so much like Jeffrey Hunter. I don't believe he was, or obviously he was an actor. I don't believe he did any stunt work, but it's uncanny how much he looks like Jeffrey Hunter. So.
I think we have similar luck with Anson Mount. I think Anson Mount bears a fairly, to me, it looks more like Johnny Bravo than anything else, but he has a strong resemblance to Jeffrey Hunter.
Yes, exactly. Hey, Len.
Hey, Len.
Great to see you.
Good to see you again, my friend.
Yep, I like that. That Gorn, he's a pretty interesting character, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. We'll have to see if he has any friends.
Yeah, I'm surprised he stood still long enough to do a little interview for us. So.
Oh, that was a good screenshot I did there, isn't it? Do you like that?
Yeah. What the heck?
My guess is it might have been they were just looking down the tube. So my guess is it might have been an explosion that happened shortly after that. And the 15-second mark just happened to be the full whiteout.
An interesting fact, the actor on the far right, and any other time I can remember their names in the episode. And he's in several episodes. He was in Galileo 7. At any rate, that actor, I read something recently where he actually died in a motorcycle accident back in 69 or 70 or something to that effect. We find ourselves, at least I know I do, and Jim, and I'm sure you do too, rewatching some of these episodes and then thinking, I wonder if that actor's still alive or has passed on, or what they're doing now, if they are still alive. And of course they're all getting up there, and there's not a whole lot of them left alive, but that was one name that was one character that I looked him up when I was watching this one time, and he had passed away from a motorcycle accident. So
it's crazy. I might have told you this, and I might even mention on a previous live stream. I'm not really sure, but William Shatner's first movie was like 1951. It's called The Butler's Night Off or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And the star that played the butler is still alive. He lives in London. He's like 112 years old.
Holy cow!
My guess is he and Shatner are the only two left from the series or from the movie. And I don't know whether Shatner, because I mean, remember this happening was 51, so this was Shatner's first movie. It was a very small part, so I don't know if it's one of those things that they contacted each other over the years, having both survived up to the century mark. I don't know, so
They must be on the same diet or something.
must be.
It looks right,
He really was the perfect leading man. I mean, look at just the lines on those faces.
Yep. And I think you and I have talked about this before, Jim. But as a kid growing up watching Star Trek TOS and syndication, I had no clue Shatner wore a hairpiece. It fits him so well.
Same here.
The other actor that comes to mind, the two actors that I feel like have had the best fitting hairpieces were Bill Shatner and Darren McGavin in the Night Stalker series. I thought that hairpiece looked so natural that I was like, surely that. But then if you go back and watch the original Night Stalker television film, you can see where his hairline has receded. And I've seen him in old episodes of Gunsmoke from the 60s, mid 60s. And yeah, he had even less hair in some of those. So
yeah. I had no idea that Shatner had a toupee until I read the making of Star Trek.
Yep.
Because it was the first one that
where I heard it too, or saw it too.
Yeah, because there's a memo in there or whatever, because he kept taking the hairpieces back home, and production was getting upset with him because even back then they were like $300 a piece.
Oh yeah.
And so that was the first time I ever heard about it. And I remember thinking, well, it was in the making of Star Trek, so it must be true. But then I was absolutely amazed in Star Trek 4 when, he has to go in the water to release the whales. And he's got to pull the handle. And I mean, his hair was going everywhere. And it was flowing around to the point you could what looked like you were looking right down into his scalp.
Right.
And it was like, wow, I don't know how they're doing that with a hairpiece, but they obviously did.
Yes. There is a scene we've talked about this before, and actually you've even got it now because I know a fella sent it to you. In a TV movie Soul Survivor, where Shatner plays a colonel, and he and Vince Edwards are on a Jeep at the end of the episode, and they're chasing General I can't think of his name and the character's name, but it's Richard Basehart. They're chasing him in another, not a Jeep, it's a mule they call him, I think, across the desert at night. And they're racing along, and of course Vince Edwards has real hair, so I mean his hair's just going, and Shatner's got his head down, and of course the wind is parting his hair, but he's looking up, so I mean you could tell I don't think he trusted having his head up for fear that wind would just take that toupee and just peel it back. But I don't know, they've got that down to a science now. The makeup, I mean, they've come a long way with it over the last 50 years. So,
and I actually have found photos of Shatner before Star Trek, and before hairpiece, and his hair was seriously thinning out in those photos. Enough that, yes, I could see why he wore a hairpiece every chance he got back then.
And I have never seen any picture of him without one. However, on YouTube, if you look it up, there is an episode of, actually it was an unsold pilot from the 50s of Nero Wolfe, and Bill Shatner plays Archie Goodwin, his right-hand man, and he does an excellent job at it, but the pilot was never shown on the air because it was unsold, and even then I'm guessing had a hairpiece because it was very thick hair. So
I'll see if I can find the picture that I'm thinking of and let you know. I have it up on Pinterest, but right now most of the Pinterest photos that I have up there for Trek World are on private because I have to still sort through them and stuff like that. And it also does not give me the ability to let some people in and not others. So I have some pictures been given to me, said, please do not distribute. But I remember finding the Shatner picture, and I probably stuck it in one of my holding categories and have not cleared it yet.
Gotcha. And now that it comes to mind, as you were saying that, the third actor that comes to mind that had a really awesome looking hairpiece, I thought, was Jack Klugman, who played had his own show Quincy, and he again, it was very styled, very much like Shatner's as Kirk, and also Darren McGavin as. But I knew Klugman had a hairpiece because I've seen him throughout his acting career. He did shows where TV shows where he didn't wear it. So you'd see him in one episode where he's bald, and then you'd see him in another episode, later on in the series of Quincy, where he had a full head of hair. So I knew it was a hairpiece, but it looked great. I thought it looked great. So
cool.
It's everybody jokes about it. Shatner later in the series, by third season, having such issues with his weight. And wearing the girdle, I think, at one point to keep his waistline looking fairly.
Yeah, it's clearly visible under, especially the wraparound shirt in later seasons.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of his age, and I think he was around, for instance, in the Deadly Years, he gives his age as 34, and I think that's in line with Shatner's actual age. But that's about the age where my metabolism starts slowing down, and I started having issues with my control of my weight. So you have to feel for these actors when they're in a high profile series like that, where they're
absolutely,
and you're struggling to eat something that to make you feel like you're full, but yet not everything you eat going to your waistline, type of thing. So
yeah, and I don't think back then, I could be wrong, but I don't think back then in Hollywood there existed the concept of the nutritional trainer. I mean, because right now when you get situations like Hugh Jackman going back to play Wolverine again,
yes,
Hugh Jackman always has had, in my opinion, this magical transformation in his body every time he plays Wolverine. Yes. Because he turns into this super muscular superhero that you have no problems believing every bit of physicality. Yes. But then he goes back to his normal life and does things like The Greatest Showman and some of the other movies, and he's just a normal human being.
Yes.
And his body mass is lower, the whole 9 yards. And I know that, and of course we're very intricately familiar with how The Rock does his. The concept of the weight trainer and stuff, the nutrition therapist that they have now, where they can put them on an 8-week or a 6 to an 8 week program. It is absolutely brutal when you hear what they go through.
Oh,
but the end result gives them what they can film with, and then they go back to their normal lives again. And I don't think they had that back then.
No, well, even still, to do that for a movie, one time, or for a specific movie is one thing, but to have to continuously keep that weight for a TV show,
over a 6-month period,
and that'd be like wrestlers. It would be like wrestlers, trying to make weight type of thing, where you'd have to, fast and dehydrate and everything else to get yourself down to the weight, when you get to weigh in. So.
Yeah, it's very rare when you mention wrestlers too. It's very rare that you see a wrestler undergo a dramatic transformation in body shape.
Yeah, exactly. We are the Metrons. Yeah, that's gosh, I cannot think of actors' names today. It's just driving me nuts. But golly, he was a voiceover actor. Did a lot of stuff for Johnny Quest. Did a lot of stuff on Scooby-Doo animated series, the original animated series. Special edition made the Gorn blank. Yeah, that was Len brings up a good point.
Yes, Len, you're right. Yeah, I thought that was pretty slick when they did that.
Yes, it was. In fact, the first time I saw that, I was like, I told my wife, I said, "Did he blink?" I'm like, "He never blinked in the original show." And then I watched it again, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's cool how they did that with the CGI." Very nice. It was a nice touch. Yep.
Yeah, there's a little nod to that in season 1. I'm pretty sure they've done it more seasons too, but in season 1 specifically of Discovery, Linus, they had Linus blink more than once or twice, and you could see, obviously it was the whole makeup. Well, no, I don't think the whole makeup special effects, but heavy CGI augmentation.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and that's. But they've got the tools to do that now. Whereas back in the '60s when Star Trek was made, they didn't have the tools. And you're right. I mean, it was a weekly show, so much like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea or a lot of those, it was a monster of the week kind of thing. It kind of turned into that a bit at times. So
I can't imagine how hectic it was for the behind the scenes people
I can't.
Because every week you're now researching for one or two episodes out. You're building for the next episode.
Yep.
You know, and you're addressing issues that show up possibly on the set this week when you thought all your work was done last week for this week.
Exactly.
I just can't imagine that goes on for 26 episodes, half a year. I can imagine they get burned out really easily.
Those behind the scenes, the set decorators and people of that nature, especially on TOS, were just amazing. And they created these landscapes from one week to the next that were totally dissimilar. You know, I wouldn't have thought there was enough soundstage space to do all these. And you know, if you're eagle-eyed enough, you can see certain episodes where they might have reused this or reused that, because they do. They, you know,
Yep.
television, movies, or whatever, you know, if they could save a buck by reusing sets, they will, especially Desilu, you know, working on a tight budget. But it still amazes me, as much as you hear about how tight the budget was on Star Trek, the original series, how the set decorators and creators were able to make such beautiful, distinctive sets each week for each episode that are totally dissimilar. It still amazes me, you know. My favorite parts, just off the bridge and face to face with the gore. Yeah.
Yep. You know, my memory, we got for those of us who are on the call with us or on the watch party with us today, we've got in 2 weeks would be the next scheduled watch party, but it will not be happening that for Saturday because that is Wonderfest and we'll be at Wonderfest.
Right.
They're going to have several people there from Land of the Lost. And my memory, this is terrible because I don't think I've looked up anything from Land of the Lost since I was a kid. But I'm wondering how similar, I am wondering now out loud how similar the Sleestack were to the Gorn in design. Because Asmodeus in Spectre that Roddenberry did used the Gorn head.
Right.
He just painted it differently.
Yes. And the Sleestack to me always looked like they had no teeth, like they were, you know, they wore false teeth or something and they had taken them out because their mouths were just like flat, you know. And that was Wa-Chang on that too, yeah.
Yep. And there was a question a moment ago about effect on a view screen, but unfortunately, by the time I actually read the comment, I don't know, sorry, we had already gone away from the clip, the screenshot you had talked about.
Yep. And it's
but
talking about
the comment about looking like water agitated with color lighting, I can tell you that was a very common method that was used quite often on Star Trek.
Yep. Yep.
I think at one point the transporter was they had put like, I don't want to call it pixie dust, it was like aluminum powder.
Oh, yeah.
Reflective, and stirred it up in water in order to get the swirling pattern.
Yep. You know, interesting that you mentioned that because I saw, I was watching a documentary online about the making of, I think, Close Encounters. And they talk about, behind the scenes, they're talking about how they did the clouds. When those clouds, and it's the same effect that Tobe Hooper used in Poltergeist
Over the house.
Storms coming up, and I had no clue how they did that. And the I'm trying to think of who it was. Was it Trumbull? I think it was Douglas Trumbull.
Yes, it was.
Counters says they did that by pouring, what was it, milk or something into some kind of water and filming it. And it was, or maybe it was cream, heavy cream or something. And after he said that, I'm like, you know, that's brilliant. And then I'm looking at it going, yeah, I could see where that would be, you know, that would be how you achieve that effect. So.
I don't remember this. It was in the.
So the board is nice, yeah.
I can't imagine what it was like to wear that suit.
Oh,
Vasquez rocks. For all those things.
Yeah. And that was Billy Blackburn, was it not?
I believe it was, yes.
Yeah. Have you seen much of his behind the scenes there's on
Yep.
some. Yeah, he was quite an interesting fella. I mean, and he was in many episodes. He didn't have any lines, but he was in most of the episodes, whether it be a helmsman or a navigator or you
Yeah.
know, in the background, or I think an Errand of Mercy. He was.
Yeah, I think he was in like 73 episodes or something like that. He's actually probably got more. He's got more. Ironically, he definitely has more set days.
Yeah.
Than any of the secondary cast.
Yes, I agree. You know, this shot here with Kirk standing against that blue sky, I think that harkens back to what you mentioned at the beginning, Jim, about this episode being one of your favorites because it reminds you of like the Boy Scout in all of us.
Yeah.
And that's like a Boy Scout. That's a perfect shot of like a sunny summer's day, you know, being on a Boy Scout outing somewhere or something. I mean, it's just blue skies, full sunshine. You know, you're out and exploring, you know, type of a.
So ironically, I guess what you're saying is it could have been a lot worse for Captain Kirk. It could have been a rainy, overcast day when they decided to pop him down with a Gorn.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my.
It's crazy. I'm going to toggle myself off for a moment.
Okay. Universal Translator prop. Any idea where that went? I have not heard anything. Jim might know something about that. I know there's a lot of reproductions being sold on eBay online, so people are making reproductions of that. And I think it's pretty much just a turned piece of aluminum with what appears to be almost a hair trimmer angled edge on it, you know, at the top type of deal. Yeah, I'll bet Jim has an idea what happened to it. It probably, like some of that hero phasers or communicators, it probably ended up getting taken home by somebody from the crew or a cast member or something after the series ended, I would guess. Especially a prop that small. Not easy to take the Doomsday Machine or something like that home. So, although I've often wondered whatever happened to that prop. I think Jim's still working on some background on some of the props. For instance, like the Doomsday Machine and you know, I think it was a 10-foot diorama of the shuttlecraft bay that I believe used the actual 2-foot model as the shuttlecraft in it. So I think it was a 10-foot long, 6 foot wide or something set or prop set of the hangar deck. So. I don't know. That scene with Kirk taking the bamboo and hitting it against the rock. The fact that there's pretty much bamboo tubes there makes me wonder where those came from, because I don't think bamboo grows out in the desert. I think it has to be in a wet environment. Jim, have you heard anything about? Someone asked earlier about the Universal Translator prop. Have you heard anything about whatever happened to that?
I believe it was actually sold in an auction.
Oh, okay.
And I might be able to verify that while we're on here. So we'll see.
I figured it was probably one of those props that, being small enough, it probably walked home with somebody or a cast member or a crew.
I want to say that it was the Bob Justman auction way back when that did where they sold the captain's chair and stuff like that.
Yep. I know there's a lot of folks, a couple different folks online selling reproductions of that on eBay and things. So,
yeah, that's I belong to several of these internet, like Facebook groups, internet groups, you know, that are into the props, because these people, their knowledge and access is just absolutely amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's really crazy that it is now officially a thing to collect reproductions that were done by people back in the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. And so you can have when I was a kid, I used to always think about how funny it was that I could go to some place and they would have Indian arrowheads.
Yes.
Okay?
Yep.
And when we were real small, I'd seen real Indian arrowheads. I'd found some on the beach down in the Chesapeake Bay.
Sure.
But then when all the tourist spots started opening up along the highways and stuff, you'd look at it, and I used to joke with my mom all the time that they were genuine imitation Indian arrowheads.
Yeah.
And so you can get a genuine copy of a phaser made by somebody whose name you heard after Star Trek went off the air, and it'll cost you hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands of dollars, because of the reputation they had for creating the quality of it. But the thing that amazes me is I just don't intrinsically, and maybe I'm just a plebe here, I just don't intrinsically see the value in what would make a copy, even by a well-known replicator artist, worth that much money. Yeah. Because to me, there's a binary duality to props.
Right.
It's either the original or it's not.
Or it's a reproduction, yeah.
And then as soon as you pull aside all of the originals and you're looking at just the reproductions and you look at just the quality difference spanning the supposed value ranges.
Right.
I really, really find it hard to peg the meter over to pay somebody just because they had a reputation for making an exquisite prop.
Right. I guess for me, it depends on what prop it is, Jim. Because I mean, like I said, I've studied before. My brother has a copy somebody made of Kirk's chair, and it looks decent. It's really, it's obviously not completely authentic, but nobody's ever going to get their hands on the original captain's chair either. So if you want something that's, I guess, as close as you're going to get, that's what you look for. But again, I see your point. What's the and my brother's got a reproduction of the phaser rifle from where No Man Has Gone before as well, and it's very well done. So I think at this point, it's just being able to have a piece of film history like that is the biggest draw, and the fact he's a 50-something, 60-year-old bachelor, so he's got the money to spend on it, whereas I don't.
Crazy. All right, getting back to the Universal Translator prop.
Okay.
Believe it or not, it was last resold in October of last year by Heritage Auctions. Vintage original Hero Universal Translator prop constructed of tooled aluminum hollow rod that unscrews into two sections. The bottom portion housing wiring and a lighting element, and the top portion being a grooved lathe shaft embellished by 1-inch square green and red acrylic panels on the flat portion of the device with a foil patch below.
Interesting.
The rod is crowned by a wedge top crafted from a steel file that was prominently used by Captain Kirk in the episode Arena to strike a rock, causing the spark to ignite the gunpowder. It was also used in the episode Metamorphosis to communicate with a companion.
Yes.
The device itself features a discrete on-off switch in the center side of the rod to illuminate the red and green panels. It is 11 inches long, 1.5 inch wide, and exhibits age and production wear, of course.
Yep.
Including chipped edges around the foil beneath the red and green panels.
Okay.
The prop itself was originally exhibited at Star Trek The Exhibit by the Smithsonian back in 1992.
Holy cow.
And it was featured in the making. It's the photograph of the prop that was in the making of Star Trek. It was with Greg Jean. So the October auction was his. It looks like the closing price was right around $91,000.
Holy cow. Amazing.
I think that if I remember correctly, I think they pulled like $13 million or something like that from that auction.
Wow. Well, interesting fact I just remembered hearing, the original mask or head of the Gorn is in the possession of Ben Stiller, the comedian. And I read that somewhere that he is a huge TOS Star Trek fan, and that he was, of course, able to afford that at auction, and he purchased the head. He has the head. I don't know who ended up with the suit, but the bodysuit, but I know that Ben Stiller owns the mask head for it, the original.
Yeah, the Greg Jean auction closed at $13.6 million. It was the second highest Hollywood auction ever. Ironically, back in 2011, Debbie Reynolds had an auction that fetched $22.6 million. I can't even begin to wrap my head around what was in it that caused it to be that much. Who does not like or even love the battle scene with Captain Kirk and the Gorn? I loved how Kirk spared his life. Yes.
Yep, that's one of the classic. That's one of the this episode at the end where he spares the Gorn's life is one of the classic Star Trek morality stories where he realizes that they could have been in the wrong, and compassion was one of Kirk's greatest traits that he exhibits time and time again in many of the original TOS episodes.
Yeah, I have the Christie's catalog for the auctions as well. I'm just absolutely actually, let me rephrase that because I'm talking about a bunch of auctions, but I have the two catalogs for the Christie's auction back in '96, and you can still get copies of the Greg Jean auction catalog, but they're going for like $85 a piece. But you can actually go out to a Heritage auction. I don't know if it's still available or not, but right after the auction was over, they did make the PDF available of the auction catalog, and I have a copy of that.
Ooh, I need to
list everything that was in there. Greg was in possession of a large number of publicity and behind the scenes photographs that have not been seen elsewhere.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, I need to look for a copy of that PDF because I'd love to see that. Now, when Kirk's wearing the universal translator on his waist, it didn't look like it was 11 inches long, but here it does when the Gorn's actually holding it. It does look like it's almost a foot long.
Yeah. We were talking about the tricorder earlier. Greg had the, of course he did. Greg had the original tricorder made by Hua Chang.
Oh, okay.
And it sold in that auction for $175,000.
Wow.
Which my personal opinion was a steal for whoever bought it, compared to the fact that Greg's Hero Phaser 2 sold for $187,000, and he had also a communicator that sold for $150,000.
Oh wow! Amazing.
It's worth $500,000 for the landing party set.
Jeez, that's not a bad haul for 50-year-old props.
It makes me wonder quite seriously whether Greg had any idea how much money he had sitting in his garage.
Well, he did after that, that's for sure. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Simply amazing.
Yeah, the auction was a result of him passing away.
Right. That's right.
And I keep messing his name up 99 times out of 100. I keep wanting to call him Greg Jane because I knew somebody I worked with whose last name was spelled that way but pronounced it Jane. It is pronounced Jean, Greg Jean.
Yep.
Ironically, that was the first communication I ever had with Gary Kirk. You're saying his name wrong. I am so sorry. Consider me chastised for the next 1,000 years. Gary's a nice guy. I look forward to meeting him someday.
Yep. Agreed.
This episode, as a child for me, I think, this was, I believe, probably the ultimate science project episode.
Yeah. With the
everything made so much sense that here I am, 45 years later, or however many years it is after I saw it the first time. And I've never bothered to check, but I still pretty much feel that pretty much the entire chemical layout that they defined for us to make that probably was accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, because it wasn't rocket science, although it was probably the beginning of rocket science, but still.
Right. Changing the subject for a second, Jim, I saw an episode of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea last night, and it had a I wasn't very young, but it was season 4, I think, which 60. No, it wasn't season 2 or 3, but it had Jimmy Doohan was in it, and it's the first time I'd seen him play, and I think I'd seen him in a Perry Mason episode as well. But yeah, it's cool when you see Star Trek TOS actors appear in stuff prior to Star Trek. I mean, it's gives you kind of a good idea what they appeared like in other shows before this.
Yeah, there was an episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E., I think, that Shatner and Nimoy were on at the same time.
Oh, okay. Wow.
A lot of the earliest movies and TV appearances that Shatner did were also associated with Doohan. I have no idea whether or not they ever spoke to each other, or because they were both Canadian. They came up they both came up through the Canadian playhouses and stuff like that.
Right.
So like he was Shatner played on one series. They did their own version of the Howdy Doody show, Buffalo Bill or whatever like that. So they did their own version with the doll and a new Ranger Rick or something like that. And Shatner was in the first season. And then beginning the third season, he left after that. But in the beginning of the third season, then Doohan became a regular.
Okay.
But other movies and stuff, when I looked through the production credits, lo and behold, there was Doohan in the credits with him. Both of them were pretty much down, toward mid to lower card.
Right. Interesting. Very cool.
And I just don't know whether my guess is they did not interact very much because Doohan was I think he took it more personally or internalized it more, but Doohan was as upset with Shatner as Takei is.
Yes.
And so I think that had there been even the slightest pre-existing friendship or comradeship going into the series, that may not have it, because it shows me that his feelings were hurt.
Yeah.
And people react when that happens. And I think in his case, he internalized it a lot. He would actually speak from time to time about what he thought about, Bill Shatner star treatment or whatever.
Right.
But he wasn't like Takei has, like George has been, to go out and, and sometimes it becomes the focal point of what you're saying.
Right. Yep.
Good morning, his Godzilla walk. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about it. It is kind of like that, isn't it?
Over the weekend, I watched Godzilla -0.
Oh,
and it won an Academy Award this year for Best Visual Effects. Mm-hmm. And when you see the movie, I'm just mesmerized by it. The entire budget was $15 million.
Wow.
And yet the special effects for the Godzilla and for they won an Academy Award. And when you watch it, it's just, I can't believe they made the movie for that little. I really just can't.
I was going to say 15 cheap nowadays.
But the big thing that they did differently with that movie is they went back. It's Toho Studios, the people who did the first ones.
Yep.
They went back and it's like a reboot. They're starting again from his very first appearance off of Japan. Mm-hmm. So he's protecting the Earth or he's fought all these other monsters. It's just this one giant unknown creature that they have to deal with right after World War II.
Yep.
And as a result, there are several storylines involving things like survivor's guilt because of World War II and what happened. Right. Survivor's guilt, PTSD, The movie has a lot of emotional drama. Scores a home run in the Godzilla story part.
Okay.
And I recommend it highly to anybody who hasn't seen it yet. It is only available with subtitles. However, it's like my wife doesn't like subtitles in foreign movies because generally they move too fast. By the time she's three or four words in on the screen, they block it out and take you to the next one.
Yeah.
This Godzilla -1 didn't do that. It went at a pace she was able to follow. So
it's interesting. There's I haven't seen it yet, so I'm glad you said that because I'm going to definitely look for it now. One of my favorite movies, I actually have this on DVD, is an old World War I film called The Grand Illusion, and I can't recall the director now off the top of my head, but most of it is in subtitles because the French POW, it's about a POW camp for the most part. The German actors speak in German, the French actors speak in French, and they'll be in a conversation between the two with the subtitles, and all of a sudden there'll be one line or part of a line that's in English. The German speaks it in English, or the Frenchman speaks it in English. And I thought, that's odd. And then I read somewhere later about the movie. They said the reason that is because there was no, in the actual languages for German and French languages, there was no way to say that line to make it mean what they intended it to mean without speaking it in English. So you'll have that one little line or part of the line here and there, and it's in English, and then the rest of it's subtitles and in the actual language. So it's an excellent movie. It's an anti-war movie. If you haven't seen it, it's long. It's about 3 hours long, as I recall. But it's mostly about World War I POWs and how they in a German prison camp, a couple different German prison camps.
The mixture of English with a foreign language, I encountered firsthand a couple of years back when I was working with some very particular Indian friends that I had made. And they would talk to each other on the phone in their native language. There are 7 major areas, major dialects. But they don't learn each other's languages. They learn their language and they learn English.
Right.
So what happens is if you listen into one of their conversations, there'll be this long string of vowel and consonant sounds that you have no prayer of identifying. And in the middle of it will be an English phrase. And then it'll go back again.
Okay.
And it was the craziest thing to hear. I actually had to ask them specifically, why is that particular phrase in English? And sometimes it's self-explanatory because, it's an idiom or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, I thought that was funny. They said, no, they learn English is their second language because one, it helps them obviously with international relations, obviously. And two, it means they only have to really learn 2 languages and still ensure they can talk to everybody in India as they travel throughout the country.
Gotcha. Yep. Wow. Interesting.
Well, we are down to the end credits. Director Joseph Pevney. So I guess that is pretty much it for Arena this afternoon. So for those of you who joined us, thank you very much for your time. As always, it has been wonderful. We hope you enjoyed this little walk down memory road as much as we did. I do want to point out, as it reminded everybody, that the next one of these is going to be 1 month or 4 weeks from today, because 2 weeks from today is in Wonderfest, and we won't be doing anything. We will not be doing a watch party there. We may or may not be doing a live stream event. It really depends on what the infrastructure is like at the convention facility. We'll try to take some video anyhow, but we'll see whether or not we actually can pop on and say hi to folks while we're there. Other than that, I think that's pretty much it. For those of you who are patrons, remember that we do have our patron call tomorrow at this time at 4 p.m. It'll be our last opportunity to touch base with each other before those of us who are going to meet at Wonderfest to get together on that Friday. So thank you guys. Have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all once again. Take care.
Bye-bye, folks.
So now let's get up with the fun stuff, like this right over here.